Hello and welcome back to the Foundation Year podcast and Happy New Year and welcome to what is quite a cold, drizzly January. In this podcast, we're going to do something a little bit different. Now you've submitted, those who are applying, their UCAS applications, and for those who are just starting to think about the journey towards making an application for the Foundation Year, I thought it'd be useful to hear some segments, some clips from our most recent webinar. Now, this was a webinar with teachers from our foundation year, and the goal of this webinar was to hear what the teaching is like on the foundation year and to hear questions from our live audience around the teaching and around what they can actually expect on the foundation year. So whether you have already submitted your UCAS application and you just want to get excited about what you could be learning on the foundation year the upcoming year, or if you're trying to make that decision and you want to know what the foundation year is about, this is a really good starting point where you can hear about what teaching is like on the foundation year from the people who teach on the course. And if you are interested in the foundation year, do sign up to our newsletter. Look at our events page on our website, as we do have upcoming events. There is the Think Cambridge webinar series that is upcoming for all those students who are considering making an application to Cambridge. And at the end of that week, we have a foundation year dedicated webinar. We'll have teachers and we'll have students who have been on the foundation year who are currently studying at Cambridge. So it'll be great for you, a great opportunity for you to hear from them and to hear what it is like and the process. And it is the good starting point as we get on the road again for making our applications for the foundation year. And for those who have already made their applications, they are waiting eagerly to hear if they've been made an offer. Once you hear about this, you'll also then get more details about webinar series for those applicants around interviews and the admissions process. This is just some of the support we like to give our prospective students and current students on the course, making sure that they have all the information they need. But that's enough boring stuff from me. You're going to hear from past me and the teachers from our course as we discuss what it is like to learn on the foundation year. But the purpose of today's webinar, with today being the deadline for the UCAS deadline and us not doing any admissions advice today, I thought it'd be useful to hear from some of our teaching staff and hear about the teaching on the foundation year. And they've already spoken a little bit, but I'm going to hand over now so they can introduce themselves. And I will come back at the Q&A where we'll be answering your questions around teaching and life on the foundation year. So I'll hand over to Cheyenne first.
Great, thanks, Will. So, yeah, my name's Cheyenne Suri-Wardina. I'm one of the teachers on the Foundation Year program, and I'm joined today by Ruth. Ruth, you want to introduce yourself?
Hello, yes, I teach on the program as well. And like Cheyenne, I'm also a director of studies at one of the colleges. So I'm at Sydney and Cheyenne's at Queen's, aren't you, in your dotting
Yes.
responsibilities? Yeah.
Right. So, what we'd like to do is just talk to you a little bit about the kind of general kind of information about the program, and then really spend most of our time telling you about the teaching and the different papers or courses and modules you get to learn about on the program. So, really quickly, I imagine this information is familiar to most of you, but as you'll know, it's a one-year program. It's completely paid for, and at the end, you're in a position to get a certificate of higher education. And you will be studying, most importantly, in an interdisciplinary way. And this is going to relate to what we're about to tell you. So the program will span the arts, humanities, and social sciences. And we will be teaching these things, not by separating them out into their different subjects, but by talking about them kind of side by side. And you can really see the ways that these subjects kind of interact and kind of run up against each other. If we could get the next slide, please, Will. Terrific. Okay, so apologies for this wall of text. This is just a list of all of the papers. Sorry, I'm going to use the word papers. I mean modules. This is weird Cambridge language. It's just these are like kind of like different classes that you can take when you come join us on the foundation year. So if you want to take screen grab of this or something like that, please feel free to. But otherwise, you don't need to worry about reading everything that's on this page. We're going to talk you through all of it. So you'll see these big red bubbles on the left side of your screen. Those are what we refer to as the different streams. And all we mean by that is that we've sorted all of our papers, our modules into these categories based on the kind of academic skills you're going to be using in that module. So we've got textual sources, material sources, languages, and data. Some of those are more self-explanatory than others. So I'm going to pass to you, Ruth, if you want to talk through what textual sources means and the kinds of papers you can do.
Absolutely. So everyone who studies on the foundation year will need to complete the textual sources stream. So you'll need to be examined in at least two of these modules. But textual sources is a really broad way of describing engagement with material because, of course, if you do a humanities or a social sciences degree, you're going to have to engage with text. And this is what this stream is all about. So you can see there's a list of our brilliant papers, if I do say so myself there. Cheyenne teaches on two of these and actually convenes and runs these papers. So she teaches on the education paper in the first term of the course and on a paper about the history and the law in the second term of the course. And when we think about what textual sources mean in that context, we might mean a policy document, a legal document, something of that nature, a philosophical treatise even. Whereas if you're in a different textual sources module, you'll still be engaging with text, but it'd be quite different. So there are two modules that engage with poetic texts. So you're looking at poetry. There's one textual sources module that I run, or paper, called The Religions of South Asia. And in that, we are looking at all sorts of different kinds of texts. We might be looking at again, we might be looking at some legal documents or some governmental documents that are from the period of British colonial rule in India, or we might be looking at some work that an anthropologist has done on a particular religious community in South Asia. So the real essence of the textual sources stream is preparing students to be confident when engaging with different kinds of textual sources, thinking through questions of how do we interpret those texts, how do we understand them, and how do we represent the arguments and the perspectives that are included in these texts in your own academic work. So that's what it means when it says engaging with textual sources.
Great. Ruth, to spare you having to do another block, I'm going to jump to languages. So one of the other streams that we've got is called the languages stream. And this has kind of two different components. We've got a set of modules that are kind of falling under that category where instead of learning a particular language, what you're doing is thinking about language in different contexts. So one of the papers we've got actually that Ruth is one of the conveners for is called History of the English Language. So that's really looking at linguistics and history in linguistics, the evolution of language, the way that different historical events and kind of the nature of people and kind of inventions at those times led to the development of the language that we have now. And then we've got the teaching English to newcomers in our second term. That one's more a little bit more sociolinguistics, really looking and a little bit actually on education and linguistics. So thinking about what the policies are in school for teaching English as additional language speakers, how we even categorize people as English as additional language speakers, what it means to be bilingual, and the ways in which identity, I think actually that's a theme that pervades all three language papers, are the ways in which identity and language intersect. And then finally, we have language in the information age, which runs in third term. This one really thinks about our kind of modern language context. There's some consideration of sort of media and communication studies. So how do things like the internet, the ways we use the internet, but also just the modern media landscape affect language, affect communication, and the kind of rapid changes we see in language and communication right now. But in addition to those modules, which are options in the language stream, there is also the possibility of doing an advanced language option. There are specific languages that you're able to do. There's an option of one of three modern languages. I can't remember off the top of my head what they are now, or Latin. And you do for the modern languages, you do have to have prior experience with those languages. So if you're wondering about that, that, then you can either drop us an email, or at one of the other webinars, you can raise that as a question. Latin, you need no prior experience of Latin, so you can learn that from scratch. Another one of our amazing colleagues teaches this language throughout the year. It's particularly relevant if you're interested in classics, but also if you're just interested in learning a bit of Latin, that is an option available to you and will count as sort of part of your completion of that stream. Ruth, you wouldn't happen to remember what the languages are, would you?
So certainly French, Italian, German, Russian. I think certain years of there's been like Portuguese as well, but
Okay.
it's there's a lot of modern European languages with scope perhaps more broadly, but you can definitely email in to ask about the availability of those courses.
Perfect. Thanks, Ruth. And actually, then I will pass back to you to talk about the material sources.
Great. So the papers or the modules that cover working with material objects is perhaps one of the ways of studying that you may not have encountered before. I think that everyone at school will have learned how to work with texts a little bit. You'll all be working a little bit with forms of language in different ways, even if you just did it at primary school and the first years of secondary school. But it's not so common, perhaps, to have looked at material sources. So this is an area of study that some people are encountering for the first time, and a lot of our students really enjoy having a go. So we run one materials sources paper every term. In the first term, it's a very archaeological paper about the King Richard III, who was uncovered in a car park in 2013. So it's a paper all about the excavations that took place when he was discovered in the car park, but what kind of a man he was in the medieval period, and sort of bringing some of those questions into modern day Leicester, which is where he was found. So it even gets into questions about town planning, but all the way through, we're dealing with material objects, people in time, places in time, things in time. In the second term, we move to think about King's College Chapel, which is a very big material object. It's a big building. But we think about when the chapel was founded, how it's a political force as well as a religious one, and something that kind of factors into the cultural and social dynamics in Cambridge. And it's also a big building that's been in Cambridge for a very long time, has gathered a big reputation around it, and is very important to the cityscape of Cambridge. So in studying that, you're kind of working with history, archaeology, art history, theology, religion, all different kinds of things. And then in the third term, we look at visual art. So we look at a lot of paintings, a lot of sculptures, a lot of installations in a paper on the human body in art. So you can hear in that stream all about how you can get to grips as a learner with thinking through objects and working out how to deal with objects in their particular historical and cultural context. And I think it's a really exciting way of learning. And for students who are interested in things like archaeology or art, it makes really good preparation for those kinds of courses.
Terrific. Thanks, Ruth. And then last but certainly not least is the data stream. So data, again, runs one module per term. And this stream is primarily interested in data literacy. So fear not, you do not need to know any sort of advanced math or anything like that. There's very little math involved in doing the data stream. You're primarily learning about what different kinds of empirical data mean, how to critically engage with those bits of empirical data, what sorts of questions you should be asking when you encounter it. You'll do a little bit of playing with Excel, and that's mostly to be able to get your hands-on as much as is possible when you're talking about something abstract, but as hands-on as possible to really see the difference, the different choices in how you represent data can make to the way, the the way reality is represented. So when you think about, for instance, in the first term, we run a paper on policymaking in the COVID-19 pandemic. So there was a lot of data that was being presented to the public and sort of narratives about what was happening and what we ought to do as a result. And these were all driven by representations of data, communication of data. So we'll then take a look at this and think, okay, if I graph this in a different way, am I now telling a different story because of the way that it looks, right? What questions should I ask about different studies? And then how does that all fit into policy making in such a rapidly changing situation? So one of the great challenges of the pandemic was that the policy environment had to keep responding incredibly rapidly and before they had lots of data. So those are the sorts of things you'll think about on that paper. In second term, there's one on the environment. Again, this will look at the kind of environmental considerations, and that's kind of the pool of data that you'll be looking at. You'll be thinking about the way that climate change is affecting people, the way that climate change is represented in different kinds of data, what data is kind of relevant to understanding climate change. You'll also think a little bit about some of the like conspiracy theories around climate change and how they also use data to make the arguments that they're making and what the differences are in the different ways that data is used. And then finally, sport and society. This again looks at data in a sporting context and in a policy context relating to sport. It'll ask questions about the way that sports and sporting installations affect people, the way that sports are kind of represented or understood through empirical data. And all of this includes both the kind of quantitative, numerical data, but also qualitative and understanding like interview data and ethnographical data and that sort of thing. And the main goal across all of these papers is to get you to sort of understand how you should think through and kind of be data literate in that way, rather than to understand how to gather data or anything like that. Great. So that is the end of our list of all of the papers. There's loads there. Please, if you've got any questions or if you missed anything, do stick them into the Slido and we'll come back to any papers you want to hear more about because I appreciate that was a lot of information all at once. Will, if we could get the next slide, please. Okay, so we've told you about the different streams and some of the papers, all of the papers indeed, that happen across the year. So what does all of that mean? Basically, you will be asked to what's called complete streams, which is determined by which papers you're taking. You will not be taking all of the modules that we've just told you about, so you'll make some choices, and your choices will ultimately be informed by which subjects you think you might want to go into after the foundation year. You don't need to worry about the details of that yet. There will be a lot more information about this as, you know, that becomes relevant to you sort of closer to the start of the academic year. But you will get this chance to explore much more broadly than just the specific subject or subjects you think you might be interested in. And often we find students discover a new love of a different subject that they didn't even anticipate they were really going to enjoy. Next slide, please. Right, so these are the subjects that you can progress into. If you have no idea what you want to progress into at this point, please do not worry. That is completely fine. The program is designed to allow you that time for exploration. You don't need to actually make any decisions about this until at the earliest at the end of your first term, and even then it's a kind of provisional, here's what I think I'm interested in. But these are the options available to you. And yeah, I think that's about all I've got to say about that. If you've got specific questions about any of those, just let us know. So to progress, which is something I'm sure that will be on all of your minds, you need to get at least a 65 to progress onto one of the courses at Cambridge. To pass the Certificate of Higher Education, the passing mark is 40. I should reassure everyone, though, that this is something that your evaluations are conducted throughout the year, and the teaching staff is there to support you all the way through. And loads of our students find that actually They've got offers from lots of different places. We support students with their UCAS applications in first term, and people will be choosing institutions other than Cambridge, as well as Cambridge programs that they're interested in, and will get really very good offers from lots of kind of big universities, very high level universities as well. So you're very well set up for undergraduate study, regardless of where you go, whether that's Cambridge or elsewhere. And sometimes students will decide that actually Cambridge isn't the place for them, and we don't consider that a bad thing. What we want this program to do is to help you decide what is best for you next. That might be here, that might not be, and we will support you regardless of what that decision is for you. Next slide, please. So you may be familiar by this point with the college system. This is a slight kind of quirk of this university. Actually, Ruth, I'll pass to you and let you speak to that.
So every member of the university who is a student or an academic, but for your purposes, a student, is not a student in general. Everyone has a college. So when you apply, in order to get a place, a college has to offer you a place. So when you're offered a place on the foundation year, that will be from a college. And these are all participating colleges. So what is a college? Well, it's a community. It's in for our foundation year students, accommodation for the year that you will be on the course will be allocated by your college, so you won't have to worry about finding somewhere to live. If you are someone who is either not very good at cooking, and a number of my friends weren't when we were at university, or doesn't like cooking, then they have obviously options to eat in college every day. But also, obviously, you will have a kitchen that you can prepare your own food in if you like. So it's a community. It's where you eat, it's where you study, it's where you sleep, and it founds the kind of the basis of your kind of your university life. So. There are 12 colleges. So when you apply to the foundation year, as you all will have done, you have to stipulate a college preference, or you can make an open application, which in that case you will be allocated to a college randomly. Unless you're a mature student, in which case you have to apply to one of the mature colleges on the list. If you are a woman, if you identify as a woman, you are able to apply to one of the women-only colleges, which are Murray, Edwards, and Newnham. But if any of you have any questions about college life, you can put those in the Q&A for later.
Terrific. Okay, speaking of, I suppose now is the time.
Yes, it is, and I am back. Thank you very much for that. Hopefully, you've all found that very useful. I can see lots of questions have started coming into the Q&A. So I'll just give everyone a few moments. If you want to join us on Slido, you can scan the QR code, or you can go to slido.com and enter the code on screen. If you like a question, upvote it. It just makes it easier for me to find it and to ask it to the panel. And while we're waiting for some of those questions to come in, a question I do like to ask when I get some of the staff on from the foundation year. Obviously, Cambridge has lots of resources and useful museums and places like this. What is your favorite trip or resource on the
I'm gonna
foundation
leave
year?
that to Ruth. That's a very Ruth question.
I love trips in and around Cambridge. We are really lucky. We have so many places of interest because it's a medieval city, and we've gathered up a lot of buildings that are very special, like King's College Chapel, and also we have a lot of collections. So one of the trips I take my students to in the first term is to Corpus Christi College, who have a very special library called the Parker Library. And in that library, they have about 25% of all of the existing old English manuscripts that exist in the world. So very, very old documents. You know, some of these things are 1,000 years old, and the librarians can bring them out and you can have a look at them. So for me, I'm a massive geek when it comes to books, and so I really love to see with my own eyes that kind of history. But we're so lucky that those places are a ten a penny. Do you have a place, Cheyenne, that you like to study, like you like to go to do your thinking or your reading?
That's a really good question. I do feel a little bit sort of itinerant and will like just bob around the city. I think we're kind of spoiled for great places to sit and work. There's like some local cafes that I really like. I do, weirdly, this is not everyone's favorite building, but I do really like going and looking for books in the UL, the University Library. It's a very, like, it's an enormous, somewhat labyrinthine building. And there's lots of stairs. I'm not really selling this building, but I like it. I've always enjoyed going and hunting for books in the university library.
Oh, it's great. It's exactly what you want out of a library because, as you say, there's lots of dark corners. And the university library has this thing, doesn't it? If you go up into the stacks where all the bookcases are, some of the lights in there have timers. So you have to
Yes.
kind of turn a little dial, don't you? And you sort of have light for, a minute to go and find the book that you
Go and
want.
find it quick.
And
Yeah.
then the light will just go off, and you're there in the dark and dusty corner of all of these bookcases, and it's like being in a maze. So I agree with you, Cheyenne. It's like, although it's quite a modern building, it's very brutalist. Um, but it feels quite gothic to me. It feels quite eerie
Yeah. Yeah,
and
exactly.
ghost-like. So I am also a
And I get my
massive.
steps in, so I can't complain.
Exactly. It's lots of running up and down. I mean, it's very accessible building, so there's lots of lifts, but
There are lots of lifts.
but I do go in for a bit of a run around the around the stacks. Will, are
Fantastic.
we at a place now where you've got some questions for us?
We've had a good amount come in, and we have some
Terrific.
questions around the streams. One is, well, we have a couple around different subjects, but the one I've highlighted is around law. Is
Yep.
there a required stream for progression into law?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, Ruth, I'll take this one because I'm fairly familiar with it. So for law, you need to complete everyone, I should say, needs to complete the text stream. What completion means is that you take at least two papers in that, or two modules in that stream, and you be assessed on them. Don't worry about the assessment breakdown or anything like that, but you'll probably be writing an essay or writing an answer at the exam. So for law, you have to do the text stream, as everyone does who's completing the foundation year. Law also says that data is desirable. When you see desirable marked as a kind of against one of the streams, it just means it's probably a good idea to have a little bit of experience in this stream, but you don't have to complete it. You don't have to do two papers. So often what I tell people is it's usually a good idea to be assessed in sort of one paper in that stream, but you don't have to do more than one.
Fantastic. We also have another question on the streams. Can you take modules from every stream?
You
Ruth, do you
certainly
want to take
can.
that?
And this is one of the beauties of the foundation year is that some of our students who arrive with quite broad subject interests use their first two terms as an opportunity to learn what they think they might actually want to study. So, Cheyenne's nodding her head because we're both directors of studies. We both work closely with our students, respectively, me at Sydney and her at Queen's, with students when they're choosing their modules or their papers. And I've had students come to me and say, I want to do all of them. Can I? And so we will sit down with our students at the beginning of the year and we'll help them think ahead a little bit. We'll say, oh, actually, well, you don't need to complete the languages stream, but it sounds like you want to do one of the languages papers. When would you like to do it? Which one do you like best? So absolutely, as Cheyenne says, everyone needs to complete the textual sources stream. So you need to factor that in when you're making your choices. But if you are progressing to a subject that doesn't require you to complete any other streams, you can actually afford to be very what I call pick a mixy about it. And you can go wild. You can do a bit of data, you can do a bit of languages, you can do a bit of materials as well as your textual sources stream. So hopefully that answers your question.
Just to give a bit of a sense of it in terms of numbers, if that's the way you think, there are 4 streams and 8 modules that you will be choosing. So yeah, you can do quite the variety.
Fantastic. We've had a question come in about academic support. So will foundation year students be given academic support once progressing into their degree of choice?
So
Yeah,
do
go
you
for
want to
it.
take this initially?
Sure, yeah. So the academic support that's available you'll have a team of people that are kind of attached to you for each year that you're here at Cambridge. So on the foundation year, you'll have someone who, as Ruth's referred to, a director of studies. That's someone who's kind of responsible for looking after you in terms of like your kind of academic advice and guidance. There are also other teams around colleges, like many colleges have study skills support. Some students will have through the Access and Disability Resource Center will have study skills mentors or tutors. Some of those people will change as you move into, if say you move on to your degree of choice at Cambridge, the next year, you will still have a director of studies and you will still have access to that study skill support and to potentially to Disability Resource Center mentors if that applies to you. Some of them may be different though. So I wouldn't be, if I'm your director of studies on the foundation year, then I wouldn't be your director of studies on whatever degree you go into. Say you're going into law. I'm not a law director of studies, so I wouldn't be your person, but you will have a different person who is your law director of studies. So there is lots of continuous academic support available. It's just some of the particular individuals may change along the way. Ruth, anything you want to add to that?
No, I think that was really comprehensive.
Fantastic. Would each college have different grade requirements?
No, if this is a question about progression, then it's a standard offer of 65. In very and exceptionally rare cases, a college may, with the student, with the receiving director of studies, wish to perhaps stipulate, for example, that they want the student to complete a particular stream. So Cheyenne says if you've got a data, desirable data in law, it may be that the college advises the student to maybe take a particular stream or something like that. But in my whole experience working on the foundation year, I haven't heard of anyone make a non-typical offer. I don't know about you, Cheyenne, but it's 65. I think there is technically a stipulation that in very rare cases a college may make a different offer, but it is expected to be extremely rare. I've certainly never heard of it happening before. And if it were to happen, it would have to go through a lot of consultation with the different parties involved. So I hope that this gives you some confidence that when you've chosen a college, that doesn't mean that you'll have different academic standards placed on your head, as it were.
Fantastic. And this is a fun question. I've read on the website that there is an opportunity to learn an instrument while studying on the foundation year. So one, is that true? But also, do you need prior musical experience to do so?
I can answer this because I have heard about students learning instruments while they're here. So it's not actually a part of the foundation year that the instruments are offered through. This is a university initiative, so I think it's in collaboration with the Centre for Music and Performance, but they offer the opportunity for students to learn an instrument. And my experience is that you can learn from scratch. It's subject to availability. Obviously, if you're dealing with instruments, there's not like lots and lots of Steinways going around, but my understanding is that it's an initiative where you can apply to learn a particular instrument, receive some support with lessons. I don't know about you, Cheyenne. I've heard of people doing DJing on the foundation year, and learning how to DJ through this centre. One of my students is currently in a new choir that is designed to help students who are perhaps in the future thinking about joining a college choir, but are not at that place yet and want some support developing their singing and receiving some singing tuition. So it really is something that you can start from an entry-level position. Likewise, if it's something you've dabbled in before, particularly if you've if you've sung in a choir, but it's not been, a professional choir, there's certainly spaces around Cambridge for things like that. Is there anything you wanted to add to that?
No, that about covers it. I haven't actually had any students who have wanted to do music, but I am familiar with the student who did DJing. I think that's pretty cool.
Fantastic. So we have a question here, and I'd like to add something to it as well. So what do students usually find hardest about the foundation year in the first term? And I guess my question I'd like to add to that is, how big is the jump from their current studies to the foundation year?
Yeah, really good questions. I think we'll probably both have things to say about this, so maybe I'll take a first go, Ruth. So I think academically, I wouldn't necessarily describe it as a jump in terms of it gets way harder. It's just very different. The kind of mode of study and the things we're looking for are quite different to what you will probably be familiar with from, say, sixth form. But the thing is that we're very aware of that, and we will kind of walk you through those steps right from the get-go. So in terms of how you study, there's a lot of independent study. So I know that some students can find kind of adjusting to the independent time management a little bit tricky. Directors of studies are great for supporting with that. I certainly sit down with my students and say, okay, what's your average week going to look like? How are you going to plan your week out? That kind of thing. And then the other thing that can be a little bit unusual and take some adjusting is that we definitely are looking for what you think in all of our academic work, in discussion and supervisions, in the essays that you write. It's not just about telling us, here's here's the thing that was said in what I read. It's also about adding your own voice, your own critical analysis, your own argument. And that can be a very new and unfamiliar thing to some students. And that's really just a question of practice. But we give you lots of examples and kind of give you lots of chances to practice before you have to do it in a kind of assessment setting. So I think those are probably academically the things I can think of that are the biggest judgments and biggest adjustments, and maybe represent a sort of jump from what you may be doing now. Ruth, how about you? What do you think?
I agree. I think it's nothing that students, we admit, can't handle. So I would say, I think it's a really good question because it is going to be hard, right? If you've applied to Cambridge, you've applied to one of the most elite universities in the entire world. You clearly care about learning. You want to study with us. You want to develop as a thinker. That's never going to be easy. But we wouldn't have put together this program if we didn't think it was possible. Okay, so Cheyenne's point is right. It's the sorts of teething issues that you might get with anything. We're going to be asking you what you think. We're going to be expecting you to read the original sources. So that might be, Cheyenne was talking about the shift that occurs, like the kinds of thing we're asking you to do changes. I think that's one of the biggest things that changes between whether you've done an access course at the further education college, or you've done A levels, or whether you've done BTECs. Usually, when you're studying for those kinds of qualifications, you learn from a syllabus and you learn what your teacher tells you about the perspectives that are out there. And when you're tested, you memorize different perspectives and write about them. We are asking you to go and read the original sources, which means that you will have to get used to a different way of studying. It will be mentally taxing, and it will be psychologically. There's a lot of imposter syndrome that flies around when people arrive. People start to wonder, am I really good enough? Gosh, this is hard. Am I stupid because I'm finding it difficult? And the answer is always no. We are testing you. We're wanting to expand you as thinkers. We can only do that if we give you tricky stuff to read. So there's a lot of kind of psychological battles that students have to go through in their first term when they just have to say to themselves, I can do this, I can do this. But we hope that the challenge is enjoyable. So I suppose
And
yeah.
you're never doing it on your own,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
We give you a challenge, not to say, okay, good luck. Like we give you a challenge. We want you to have a go at the hard thing, and then come back to us, and then we talk through it together. So
Yep.
never on
But
your own.
it's such a great question, because if you're already thinking that you might find stuff hard, you are able to prepare for that eventuality. And when it is hard, you can say to yourself, well, I always knew it was going to be hard. Like now I've got to go. I've got to get on with it. And that's why we love teaching as well, because we see you start to meet these challenges.
Fantastic. And we have a question around exams. I'm going to combine two questions here. So what are the exams like? So from a sort of almost like content perspective, but also are exams completed in exam halls, or are they done at home digitally?
Okay, so good question. The exam is basically going to be asking you to do the same things that we've been asking you to do throughout the year. Part of the exam will involve looking at a piece of text you've never seen before. And since you all have to do the text stream, you'll be familiar with sort of looking at text, reading through them, and then saying some things about it. So that's one bit of the exam. The other bit of the exam will involve writing some essay answers. You'll get some questions. The questions will look very sort of similar in style and content to what you've been doing throughout the year. And you'll be asked to write a sort of short essay in response based on the content that you've learned through the year, but again, bringing your own voice into it. In terms of how the environment in which you will be writing them. This varies depending on your own sort of adjustment requirements. By default, you would be writing in an exam hall. For some students, they have sort of access requirements that mean that they need to be writing either using a laptop or in a room with fewer people, or they need to get extra time, or they need some breaks. All of those things are kind of accommodated for. You will not be in your own room. So that's one thing that we can definitely rule out. You would be under some kind of invigilation, but what exactly that looks like really varies quite a bit from student to student.
Fantastic. We have a question here. It's using land economy as the example, but it could be quite useful to think about other subjects as well. Can you progress to land economy even if your A levels were irrelevant? For example, if a student did an A level in history, English literature, and classics, but they completed the foundation year, would they be able to then study land economy, for example?
Ruth, do you want to take that one?
Sure. So, as everyone is aware, the qualification for progression, the conditional offer you're given is 65%. So, if a student meets the criteria for the progression subject, so in the case of land economy, am I right, Cheyenne, that you have to do data for land economy as well as the textual sources paper? So, if you meet that requirement, and so you complete the streams you need to complete and you get 65% and the college has offered you, yes. So it really doesn't matter what you've done before you start the foundation year. If you are successful in securing an offer for the foundation year, if you meet that offer, you are basically being told that now is your time to find out what it is you want to do. So we've got lots of examples of people who've come in thinking, for example, that they want to do a subject like law, and then by the end of 2 terms they want to do classics, or or swap the subjects around. So what we will say is that we would want a student to aim to progress in a subject that they had an aptitude for. So, for example, if someone had done A-level history, English literature, and classics, and they did not find that they had an aptitude for data analysis, but they had a real aptitude for literature analysis, then we would be wanting to ask that student whether land economy would be the best fit for them. But if you are doing the data papers and you're doing well in them, if you're engaging well in those papers and you're getting, progression level grades, absolutely, So I hope that does that match with what you would have said, Cheyenne, in response to this question?
Absolutely. The offers that are made are on the basis of foundation year, and so it doesn't matter what your A levels were. As Ruth said, the main interest and sort of concern for colleges is to make sure that you're going into a subject that you'll be able to thrive in, and so yeah, it's just based on how you do with us.
Fantastic. And I suppose that is one of the benefits of the foundation year. It's very good preparation for taking that next step. How does the foundation year support students in building confidence in academic discussion and supervision style learning?
Is it too flippant to say practice, practice, practice? I think that's largely what it is. But we don't just throw you in and expect throw you in with the wolves and expect you to go. You've got supervision right from induction week. We do a kind of here's a little bit of what supervision's like, kind of mock supervision right in induction week. And one of the things we do is make sure that everybody understands what the expectations are in a supervision. So do everything we can to make it a respectful space. A lot of students find supervision really fun, but it can be very nerve-wracking, particularly if you find it a little bit intimidating to kind of say your ideas out loud. So we've got lots of suggestions. I usually find I give suggestions to students based on what it is that they're finding scary, right? So for some people, it's having to think of something on the spot, in which case I say start out by trying to write something down and come into supervision with that question or idea. So we kind of work with students. Some students will sit very quietly and not say anything in the first few weeks of supervision, and that is okay. We will never put you on the spot and say, you haven't said anything, speak up. We know that people have, need time to adjust and will adjust in different ways. And some of those students then end up becoming really lively participants in supervision. There's lots of different ways to make the most of supervisions, and we do want to help you gradually, gently build that confidence. Ruth, what would you say in answer to this?
It's a journey. Cheyenne's right. We don't expect students to come to us fully formed. You will experience different kinds of supervision discussion as well over the course of the year. So most of your foundation year supervisions will be in groups of 4, 5, 6, which can be intimidating if you've got students in there who have confidence and they are, like me and my colleague Marika and Cheyenne, we're very loud people. We talk, but I wasn't always like that. I was with one of the people that in lectures when I was at university just used to sit there and sort of and not say a thing. So as Cheyenne says, we realize that people need a bit of time. But although that's the main way you'll be supervised, for your EP, for your extended project, you'll have things one-on-one. So that's another opportunity for you to just be one-on-one with someone, and then you really will have the space to speak. So Cheyenne's right. It's exposure therapy. It's being placed into that context on a weekly basis that helps you relativize it. So that by the time you finish the program, if you do end up progressing into Cambridge, then you've had a whole year of getting used to supervisions, and that's absolutely brilliant as far as I'm concerned.
Amazing. And off the back of mentioning the extended project, we do have a question around the extended project. Is this typically a dissertation?
Yes, so if by that you mean, is it a written report on a particular theme of a certain length, then yes, in every case, the extended project asks students to tackle in 4,500 to 500 words a theme that would broadly be situated within one of the subjects that's on offer as a progression subject for the FY. So there's a lot of breadth in the scope available for the kind of topic you choose. But the level of research, the way you'll be researching and the limits of the project are that you've only got a short amount of time to do it. You're not able to, for example, go and conduct interviews because you've just simply not got the time or the scope to do that. So in essence, what the extended projects we often get are they're often either analysis of a source or a few sources. They are projects that if you're interested in sociology, for example, you can take a theme and then you can survey sociological literature on a particular theme and make some conclusions. If you're I had a really keen future land economist in one year who wanted to do a project on the Sri Lankan civil war and the economic crisis. And they, with a land economy perspective, were looking at lots of data produced by different organizations. So they were doing a lot of data analysis in their extended project. So it will be a written piece of work of a particular length. We ask you to write a research question and answer that question in those number of words. And it's something that we want to be manageable in the time that you have, if that answers the question. Cheyenne, what would you like to add to
No, I
that?
think that about covers it. Yeah, it's a chance to sink your teeth into something that you find particularly interesting, and to write kind of an extended piece of writing on it. Don't be put off by the sound of the length. You will quickly find when you start writing, even when you like right from the get-go, when you start writing things for us, that actually the words go by fast. So in the abstract, that sounds really intimidatingly long, but yeah, students I have not had a student yet do an extended project and say, I just couldn't get the word count high enough. That's never the problem.
Fantastic. How many hours per week are spent studying in lesson supervisions and with self-study?
So each module will involve, on average, 4 hours of teaching per week. That's usually a lecture, a seminar, and a supervision. Sometimes it's 2 lectures and a supervision. And in first and second term, you'll be doing 3 modules per term. So that, if anyone's quick with their maths, it's about 12 hours a week that you're spending in contact hours, some kind of teaching. In terms of self-study, I always find it difficult to put a number on this. And I don't know if you agree, Ruth, but because it really varies from person to person. Some people need a little bit more time to do reading. Some people read fairly quickly. Some people write really quickly. Some people need more time to do that. What we do tell, certainly as a director of studies, what I tell my students is that you should be able to balance the time you're spending on work with, personal life, basically, joining college societies or teams, having time for socializing, sleeping well, exercising if you want to. You should have time to balance your studies with all of that. It does make for a busy week, but it is possible to strike that work-life balance. And where students are finding it's not possible to do so, there's usually some intervention that's kind of called for there, whether that's some kind of study skills support or assistive technology, if it's something sort of disability related, that sort of thing. I know that doesn't exactly answer the question, but hopefully that addresses the concern in the background. I don't know, Ruth, if you want to add anything else.
Yeah, I mean, the way of thinking about it psychologically is that it's equivalent to a full-time job. That's why we're offering, one of the reasons we're offering a scholarship is that we do not expect our students will have to take on another job on the side, for example. So treat it in many ways as your full-time occupation. And as Cheyenne says, we'd expect you to be able to fit in around that, or either in the evenings, or because it's a flexi hours job where maybe the downtime you have is on a Tuesday afternoon rather than on a Saturday afternoon, and you can kind of do some study on a Saturday afternoon. So it's that kind of a way of using the week. Basically, we'd expect you for it to be the primary thing you're doing with your life. um, but it's not going to be all consuming, as in you will, just like anyone with a job would expect to have places in the week where they're off, I don't know, playing mixed netball for their college or going swimming, or I don't know, like in the bubble tea society, as one of my tutees is. There's all sorts of things you can be doing.
Fantastic. And I believe we have this question come in because we have mentioned the induction week. It's quite far down the timeline in terms of where we are, but when is the induction week, or when does the induction week usually take place?
Third week of September.
Fantastic. So I think that was quite an easy one to answer. So that's a quick win there. Do we have to learn different referencing styles in different modules?
There are 2 different referencing styles that we use on the course. So one is basically it's Chicago or Harvard. So either, I can't remember which one's which now.
Harvard is brackets
Harvard's
in the
the
text.
in-text, right? Yeah, Chicago's the footnoting. And basically, it's a question of ask the person who's teaching you which one they prefer. On my papers, I always tell my students, I don't mind which one you use, just pick one and be consistent. On some papers, they're a little bit more specific, but you will only ever be asked to use one of the 2 of those. There won't be sort of as many referencing styles as there are modules or anything horrible like that.
Fantastic. And I think we have time to fit in our final 2 questions that have come through. I just have to say this time, thank you very much for all of your questions. I'm sorry if we didn't get to all of them, but let's finish off with these final 2 questions. How are things assessed? Is it done just by exams, just by assignments, or a combination of the 2?
Ruth?
It's both. So as Cheyenne mentioned briefly earlier, we run a system of continuous assessment. So in the Michaelmas term, there are some coursework assignments of around 2,000 words, 2,500 words of length. They contribute to your final grade. There's another one of those in the second term of the year. You've just been hearing about the extended project. That contributes to your overall grade. And then there's an end of year exam. So it is cumulative. The exam is the sort of heaviest component. It's where most of the marks in any one individual thing. The exam is kind of like the most marks attached to it. But it's a mixture of both. And that in the broadest sense is comparative to tripos. Most triposes are mainly exam. But some of them have quite substantial coursework elements as well. So that it's consistent with a number of tripos subjects.
Fantastic. And we'll round off with this final question around support. What study skill support is there on the course?
Yeah, loads within the course and from your college and from all sorts of other sources besides. So I'll starting in the course. The study skill support you get from us, there is a set of sessions that we run called academic literacies. So you'll be learning about academic skills that are very kind of, that may be new, that are really important to success on the foundation year. So it'll be things like reading and identifying different kinds of texts, referencing and paraphrasing. What do you do when you're working on something that's extremely emotionally challenging, that you find kind of, that you have strong views about? How do you make a good argument? That sort of thing. And then through college, you'll have some study skills support from your director of studies who might help you with things like more of the sort of, how can you manage your calendar? What sort of like a process do you go through for working on an essay? How do you start? But there's also lots of other support beside your director of studies and the FY staff. I mentioned the Access and Disability Resource Center. So for anyone who has a disability or thinks they might have access or disability needs, then the Access and Disability Resource Center is available to you, and they can provide people with screening, with potentially with study skills tutors, and colleges often have other kinds of study skills support. From librarians who can help with things like research and referencing, to people who can help with writing. So in a nutshell, there's tons. And what I recommend you do is once you get here, speak to your director of studies who can kind of point you in the right direction.
Amazing. And just a little bit of a plug at the end before we all go off. If you have not done so yet, you might want to sign up for the Foundation Year newsletter. This is a monthly newsletter with useful advice, details about upcoming events, practical resources, and also student insights. And off the back of student insights, we also have the Cambridge Foundation Year podcast. So we're doing this as a monthly podcast. It's a great way to hear from our students and also just to get lots of useful advice. This is released at the end of every single month. If you're not already sick of the sound of my voice, it'd be great if you subscribed. It's really useful. I'd like to say this time, thank you very much for listening. We have the website and the email addresses on screen if you do have any questions off the back of this. But at this time, I would like to say thank you very much to the panel and thank you very much for joining us, and have a very relaxing evening. And we hope to speak to you all soon.
Thanks, Will.